There it is.
Welcome to Child Dev Lunch. Shout out to our partners who give us money that allows us to buy you this wonderful pizza and this beautiful space that we're in. And these are the rest of them. All of them make monetary contributions. So that's why we like to show them some love with getting on the old Twitter horn and giving them a shout out. So if you have your phone handy and a Twitter account and want to help us out here, this is something that we use in our metrics when we go back and talk to our partners about how much community love they get, and it really helps us out in raising more funding. So we just recently started up an Instagram account, and Andrew over here has a Humans of Cha Dev series running. So check it out there, and you'll probably be harassed sooner or later. So get ready for that. Of course, we're on Twitter and Meetup, which I think pretty much all of you are aware. If you're not on Meetup, get on there, RSVP, so we can get a good count for the pizza. We always like that. Of course, this is live streaming and will be available now and forever, or until the end of YouTube. Probably forever. So these are all our different meetups, of course. If you have an interest, we're probably trying to tickle it. If you don't see it up here, come talk to us, and we would love to help you start that community. Cha Dev survey. Do you want to come and say something about that? Go ahead and chew that, swallow that food quick, and jump up here and say a few things about what this is all about.
Yeah, sure. First off, thank you to the 20 people who have filled out the survey so far.
Woo! Woo!
Don't tell me who you are, unless you really want to. So I put together this Google form to act as a survey to kind of get a feel for the developer community here, and have you guys report on things like salary, vacation, and that sort of thing, and kind of create a local version of Flat Store for this developer community here. And so if you want to be part of that, check it out. Put your info up there. I'm going to compile a infograph of all the main metrics and data and stuff. So,
Okay, so like ultimately, what's the primary goal of this? What's the idea?
Yeah, so I guess it'll allow you to see kind of where you are in things and see if you're kind of getting a good deal where you're working, or if you're kind of getting a
We're talking about money here.
Yeah, money and just full compensation. You know, it's not just about money.
Okay.
But
to bring transparency to the community.
yeah, exactly. Thank you.
All right.
Also, tell your coworkers about this, because like this type of data really starts to take substantial meaning when you get about at least 70 people. So we find it to expand a little beyond our normal borders to get enough responses, but it will have meaningful impact.
Yeah, if you guys have any ideas for stats within the data set, let me know, and I'll pull some stuff together. So far, I'm just like running medium, and mode, and some different stuff. I forget the exact numbers we got, but yeah, cool. I'll tell you more when I do more.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Onward. Join us on Slack. We're on there hanging out every day, and you can hit up this link at the top here and get your invite, and then pop in the channel. Cha Dev is our Slack org. If that isn't your thing, IRC might be, and we're on there too. You can always check the job board. We invite our community partners to post their jobs here, and so you can kind of get an idea for what's going on there. These slides, of course, are available right there, and you can go there and you can click on these links, because they are links. So Andrew Steele is going to be talking to us today a little bit about what you see here, and he works at Ortho OrthoBank, right now, its current projects include optimizing their payment systems. So I'll leave it to you, Andrew. Give a round of applause, guys.
Thank you. As Brett said, the talk today is called Find Your Story, Building Better Sites by Building Better Stories. My name is Andrew Steele, and you can find out everything you want to know about me at my About Me page, about.me/Andrew Steele. These slides and more will be available at the end of the talk today. Here's a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. The text is too small to read. Don't worry about it. We'll get to it. I'm going to start off with a quick introduction of myself. Give you an example of what a bad story looks like on existing websites. Go into why should we care about stories? Why do we even care about this talk? Obviously, you have some idea of why you should care, or you wouldn't be here right now, unless you just really like pizza. That's okay too. What or who should we write about? This will go into some of the details as to what kinds of stories should you write, how should you write them, and we're going to go into some specifics too about how to implement story writing as part of your site development. So starting off, who is this guy? I have to ask that question every day. I am Andrew Steele. Roar. That's me. Hear me roar? Roar. Okay. You got to work with me, people. These are the jokes. I am a professional coder for over 8 years now. I specialize in front end, but I also know Ruby and PHP and a little bit of Node.js as well. Get that JavaScript everywhere I can. I'm also a writer in my spare time. I like to write modern science fiction and urban fantasy fiction. So if you have the literary bug in you as well, stay away from me, please. No, I'm just kidding. I'm happy to talk anytime. And I've almost finished my first novel. Maybe this will be the year that I say that again for the 12th time. On a personal note, I am married for about 8 years now, and I have 3 wonderful children, ages 5, 2, and 4 months. So I am exhausted all the time. Let's go into what a bad story looks like, because it doesn't really do much good to tell you about the reasons why we care about stories if you don't know what a bad story looks like. I'm going to start off with this wonderful slide right here from Spotify. Now this is really hard to see on the screen, I apologize. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit there. That's better. All right. Can anyone tell me, this is a little bit of audience participation, sorry I didn't prep you, can anyone tell me what's wrong with this screen from a UX story perspective? Any guesses?
The link at the bottom that I always have to look for to actually log into our account.
That's it exactly. Here's another example. Sign up, or sign in, or whatever.
No call to action.
No call to action. Yeah. Well, here is another example, because I think it's hilarious that Tumblr has a woman with horns sticking out of her head. The login button's all the way up here. The sign up is right here. What's wrong with this from a story perspective? It's telling your users, we don't care about you once you sign up for our system. You got to sign up. That's all that we care about. More butts in the virtual seats. As soon as you're on our team, you ain't leaving. We don't give a hoot about you anymore from there. Here's a counter example. Sign in to iCloud. Right, big, nice. It's pretty. It's the main feature of this page. And apparently that's as far as I can zoom in. But down here is where you go to click to sign up for iCloud if you're not already on there. And this is telling us Apple cares about their users. They care about the story that they're presenting to their users. Spotify, Tumblr, you get the horns. If I go visit a service that requires me to log in to use it, all I want is to be able to log in instantly. This is from the guy who put those slides together, Josh Tyson of UX Magazine. And it's absolutely the sentiment that we should be focusing on as designers, as developers, as anyone who cares about people actually using the things that we're making. Just want to get it done. So why should we care about stories? Well, I've already talked a little bit about that. But the whole point is we want to have people want to come back to our sites, want to come back to our applications, want to use our stuff as opposed to the other guy's stuff. If you're making the best email program out there, but nobody cares about using it, no one's going to use it. Same thing with websites. If you are selling basketball gear as an example, and you have a story that says, we only care about basketball players, you're going to miss out on a potential revenue stream from people like the basketball players' parents and grandparents and friends who might want to get something for those basketball players. Here's another point to keep in mind. Phil Nottingham, a video strategist from a company called Distilled, put this slide up just a couple days ago, saying that time to hook attention, you've got about 7 seconds on your average landing page before someone says, not for me. YouTube, it's down to 5 seconds. If you're making a video and those first 5 seconds don't immediately grasp your attention, someone's going off. Facebook, you got 2 seconds, which says don't advertise on Facebook. Basically how that works out, because you're not going to win. This is further shown by a study done by a group called Altitude, and they just recently had an article published in Fast Company talking about Generation Z. These are the young people, the up-and-comers. Some of you might even be in Generation Z. They're just about 18, 19 years old at the top end of the age scale. And Generation Z people have gotten a bad rep so far, saying that they have an 8-second attention span. Well, this company said that can't be right. What it turns out is they were raised on the internet, so they have an 8-second filter. That goes right back to that 7 seconds you got to hook someone on your landing page. If you can't get into their psyche and into their conscience and hit them on an emotional level that hooks them into your product and your site within that 8 seconds, you're history. They've completely forgotten about you already. Here's another thing to keep in mind. Lack of trust is one of the biggest impediments to successful e-commerce. This is Natalie Nahai speaking. She's also known as the web psychologist. She specializes in looking at how do people use the web. Why do they do the things that they do on the web? What are their motivations, their behavior, cognitive science? She is amazing. I've got links to her stuff in the links at the end. Go check her out. But another way of putting this, perhaps a little bit more crassly, from Mike King. We do a lot of one-night stands in lead generation and not enough long-term relationships. And it's true, we just want to get butts in the seats. We want sign-ups, we want conversions. We don't give enough thought to what comes after they're signed up for our service. We don't ask ourselves, why would they want to keep coming back now that we've got them? So what or who should we write about? Here's where I stopped doing so much on the slides because I ran out of time. But I'm going to tell you about D&D. Dungeons and Dragons, for those who are uninitiated, you poor, poor saps. Now, when I was growing up, I loved role-playing games. I loved D&D. And one of the things that I loved most about D&D were the stories. And the thing that I loved most about the stories, because it's a game, was making characters that fit into those stories perfectly, that exploited mechanisms within the story to make the best, most badass character I could, so that when I went into the dungeon, people are like, why in the good world would you pick that combination of skills? And then my story lore kicks in, and I'm like, oh, I know where we are. I know what we're doing here. And as a developer and as a designer, your job is to figure out what characters are going to be navigating your dungeon. Site. So this is one thing that we can do as developers and designers, is we can look at things like persona generators. And persona generators are these great little tools that allow you to create people, basically. There's ways that you can do this, and I'll include some links that I found later on. I didn't get them into the source material yet, but I'll make sure that we get them in there eventually. There are tools that allow you to create fake people, complete with names, backstories, histories. If you can't find one of those or they don't quite fit your need, go out and get a Dragons and Dragons, that one, character sheet, and you can create characters that way. And the idea here is you want to have someone that you're actually programming towards. Just like we often have an idea in our mind of the functionality, we want to have an idea in our mind of the flow. We want to have an idea of why someone is going to want to use this functionality. And oftentimes, I've found, that will actually lead you to changing your functionality. Because you'll get to a place where you say, well, this is tabular data, so I made a table, and it's very lifeless, and it's zebra striped, but why would anyone care? You know, and so we look at the flow, and we look at what is it that the user is trying to do. And I go back to that example of the basketball site for this. If you're selling basketball gear, you have to think about the basketball players using your site, but you also have to think about their friends, their family, sports reporters, people who are out on the street and just living it up, even though they can't throw a free throw to save their life. You've got to think about all of the edge cases. And it's difficult to think about all of the edge cases if you go into it thinking, this is my one specific niche that I'm trying to save. This is the one that I'm trying to sell towards. But if you use persona generators and you come up with different user stories, that gives you the ability to go even beyond that. User flow diagrams is another step in this direction of how we figure out who we're writing towards. Who are we creating these sites for? So as you start making your application and making up your site, you start looking at how are they going to go through this website? And if Spotify had done that, they would have immediately found, oh wait, no one can find our sign-in link. That's kind of a problem. Why are we not doing that? Tumblr, likewise. If you're not looking for the login button up in the upper right, you're looking for it in the center of the screen because that's what you want to do, you might lose your customer and they're going to run off and go somewhere that actually appreciates them. So the user flow diagrams starts at when they first come to your website. What is the first thing that they see? What's going to catch their attention? And then it's going to look at where are they wanting to go next. And as you look at where do you want to go next, and after that, you start getting an idea in your head of the story of this person going through your website. User flow diagrams are also very helpful for when they come back. And when they come back, they're not usually going to come through the front page. They're going to come in through an account settings page or a membership page, those sorts of things. User flow diagrams help us to recognize where the cohesiveness through our site and our application starts to break down, where we start losing people. And Google Analytics in particular is very useful for figuring out drop-off. Where do people suddenly leave our site? And you can take a look at what's wrong with those pages from a story perspective. So how do we write these stories? Well, if you're me, you start writing an actual story. And I actually come up with those persons that I've come up with on my persona generators, my user flow diagrams, and I actually write out in my head, usually, but sometimes on paper too, where are they going? Why are they here? What appeals to them about this site or application? How do I make them awesome at doing what they came here to do? And that's a question I ask myself about any website or web application that I make, is how do I make the user awesome at doing what I want them to do? Because that's the end goal, is empowering people. Another tool that I've used is called Faker. And Faker is a great tool. It's a Ruby tool, but there's also Pretender is another popular incarnation of that. And what this allows you to do is from day one, when you're scaffolding up your website, it will pre-populate your database with fake people. You give them your schema, you give them what kinds of info you want about each person, and Faker will go in and generate all of that for you. What's helpful about this is, especially on those sign-up pages, sign-in pages, membership pages, and account settings pages, you actually have real data there that you can think about. This is an actual person, well, a real fake person anyways, that's coming in and using my site. I want to treat them with the respect that I wish someone else had treated me with when I came to that site. So Faker is really useful for that. Here's another thing to keep in mind as you're designing. Make it fun. Confucius said, I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. This quote comes from a website that I found while I was doing research called Explorable Explanations. And I'll have a link to them as well. And Explorable Explanations looks at how do we take big data like charts and graphs and make it interactive. This is something that you can do on just about any website. adding in a little bit of interactivity to the process to engage people in what they're doing on your website. Guided tours is a great example of how to do this with your site or application. Guide them through the process of click on this, click on that. Now type in here, submit this, and now you've done one round of editing or one round of creating content or one round of purchasing something, whatever your site and application's goal is. And your user has now done it and they've felt empowered to do it and they're going to want to do it again. Another tool that I found is called Alex. And Alex is a JavaScript tool right now. And this is another one of those horribly small ones. Apologies. The boogeyman wrote all changes to the master server. Thus the slaves were read-only copies of master. But not to worry, he was a cripple. Now, if you are like me, you immediately get some red flags, and so does Alex. Boogeyman may be insensitive. Use boogie instead. Alex will also tell you slave's master may be insensitive. Use replica and primary instead. This is a tool that allows you to find all of those jargony tools, jargony terms that we use every day to describe things like slave master replication that might be insensitive to a general audience. Things that are too gender specific, things that are racially insensitive. Cripple might be insensitive. Use person with a limp instead. Now, obviously, that's an extreme example of oversensitivity, but it's still useful when you're writing copy for your website to have those ideas in mind of, oh, I'm making this website for women. I probably shouldn't be calling them dudes. Humanize Plus is another tool that I found. This was created by HubSpot, and it's extremely similar to some of the functionality that's found in Ruby's active support. And what Humanize Plus will do is it'll take numbers, as an example, and add in those commas and decimal places for you, and add in currency symbols. It'll take words and pluralize them for you. The whole goal of Humanize Plus being to take these things which are just raw data from our database and present them in a more humane way. And that's something that we should all try and strive for as we're creating, is to make content that's humane. We're not presenting websites and apps for the sake of computers. If we were, there wouldn't be an interface, it would just be an API, and then you could just ignore this entire talk. But if you have an interface and you have content that's going in front of people, you should present it in a way that's not going to make them feel dumb for using your site. So in summary, and I probably blew through this talk a lot faster than I should have or could have, but that's the life that I live. Write to sell, write to connect. Write about real fake people. Write early, write often. These are just good concepts to keep in mind as you're creating stories for your website, for your application, to get into the mindset very early from the beginning. We are telling a story with our application. And in fact, that's the conclusion that I'm going to leave you with. Stories have the ability to change the world. Let whatever you touch tell a story. I have been Andrew Steele. A special thanks to my wife Alice for her support. Thanks to Natalie Nahai, Sam Landa, Phil Nottingham, and Mike King for their great materials and ideas. If any of you wants to say hello to someone in Britain, yell really loud, hello. Hello. They appreciate it. You will be able to find these slides and more on GitHub. We'll have links up on the ChaDev website. And at this point, it's Q&A time. If you have a site or application and you are completely bumfuzzled as to how to make a story for it, I'm here for you. If you have any questions about anything that I've talked about, I'm here for you. Your turn. I'm done. We're good? More pizza in the back. Okay.
Any examples of personas or any other artifacts that you particularly like that you can share?
Yeah. Let's see if I can find one of these. So let me Google that for you. So here's one that I've used before, the fake name generator. That generates random names. That's a good first step. Then here is a random person generator. This one gives you a little bit more detail. There was one that I found a little while ago that I really liked a lot more, but I can't seem to remember where I found it at this point. Apologies. Yeah, maybe that one. So that one gives you data in a tabular format. I will do some more research. I forgot to find the to get that one.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you start with the objective and then work your way back into the story, or do you start with sort of the user and where they're at, and then work your way into sort of the objective?
That's a very good question. What I tend to do is it depends a lot on. It depends on where you are at in your process. If you have a service or an application that you're already creating, then you already have your objective. And then you can try and figure out how to fit the narrative into how do you get people to care about doing what your site or app allows them to do. If you don't already have a site or app, then you're in the ideation stage, and you get to take a look at what are the problems that I have? What are the problems that my friends have? What are the things that I wish were better in the world? And then you can start to create the narrative from there, and then you get an idea for how to make an app or a service out of that. So narratives can work both ways. If you already have a tool, you can fit a narrative to that tool and convince people why they should use your tool, why they should care about your tool, how this tool will make them more awesome at doing whatever it is you're helping them to do. Or if you just have some problems, some pain points. Dog fooding is the term for making something to fit your own needs and scratch your own itches. And narratives can be extremely helpful for figuring out how to go from this is the problem that I'm facing, how do I solve this problem? And one of the great things about narrative development there is you'll often start with a problem and then you'll end up with a completely different solution than you thought you needed to solve that problem, because you realized through the course of creating the story that the story led you in a different direction.
I can ask follow-up questions all day. Tell me to shut up if you'd like. Qualitative feedback. Do you interview people when you're working with someone?
Mm-hmm.
Interview experts? Because obviously, recognizing that you're the teller of the story, but you have to have people help
Absolutely.
identify that story. How do you do that?
Well, user research is a whole field unto itself. I probably should have stressed this more at the beginning, but I didn't. I'm more of a UX enthusiast than a UX practitioner. I'm still figuring out the nuances. But certainly, you can go to your friends and say, here's an idea that I have. Do you think anyone would care? And your friends will say, oh, that's awesome. I wish you would build it right now. I could use that today. Or they'll tell you, it's interesting. In which case you say, okay, I probably shouldn't try and invest too much time into that one. But getting feedback early in allows you to determine, is this something actually worth making? Once you've made it, go to your users and say, thank you so much for signing up for this application. I have just a quick 3-minute survey that I'd love for you to fill out. If you do this, it'll help us make this application even better than it already is. That's a good way to get buy-in from your users to help them feel like they're owning the product. And then further on, getting expert opinion is also very helpful if you have experts in the field that you're trying to address. The problem that I have with experts is the more specialized you get in a specific field, the worse you are at noticing how that field interplays with any other field. So it's very important to get a broad spectrum of people involved in whatever it is that you're doing. And experts have their place, but I try to advise everyone, take expert advice with a grain of salt, mine included. Any other questions? Writing challenges? It was a dark and stormy night.
Yeah. So, so most people, a lot of people will just start with like wireframes.
Yes.
So can you sort of just tell us like the steps from 1 to X before the wireframes? Like how do you, like where ideally should you start?
Yeah.
For a new project?
Yeah.
What steps do you take after that?
Well, I think one of the first things you have to do is even before you get, if you have the luxury, even before you get to the point of saying, this is the service we're going to offer, look at your market audience. Look at who is this going to be for? Who are the people that I'm making this thing for? And the stories will start to come out of that. And you want to go through a lot of ideation. You want to go through a lot of, well, if we try to solve it this way, how is that going to affect people? If we try to solve it this way, how is that going to empower them, or is that going to actually limit them? Sometimes you'll find that the solution you had in mind actually makes people dumber, and it limits their ability to go through with what you're doing. So telling that story from the very beginning of this is where I want them to be, and having that focus in mind again, and I wish I could remember who came up with this idea, make user awesome at X. And if you start from that perspective of, I want someone to be awesome at doing spreadsheets, then you start making a spreadsheet editor. If you want to make someone awesome at selling puppy chow, you might not do a spreadsheet editor. You might do something else. And having that idea in mind from the very beginning of, we want to make them awesome at doing this, that starts to inform your story. Once you have a good story in mind of this is what we want them to be able to do and empowered to do, then you can start to look at what is the functionality that I can provide to them that will allow them to do what I want them to do. And why should they care about it? You always have to go back to caring and empathy. If I was this person, what would I want to be able to do? And sometimes users don't know what they want. That's okay. That gives you creative license to say, this is a problem that's never been solved before. They don't even know that it's a problem. Let me show them through the narrative of my website or my web app or desktop app or native app or whatever it is that you're making. How do I show them this is a problem that they could solve? And that if they did, that they would feel empowered and excited and encouraged about moving forward with life. And once you have an idea of where they need to go, then you can start making the wireframes.
Sweet. All right, thanks, Andrew.
No problem.